Hi, I'm Chris from CodeReviewVideos.com, and in this video we're continuing on with our test-driven approach to wallpaper updates, and this time we're looking at adding in the image preview feature, which is when we go to edit or update an existing wallpaper. As long as it's got an image associated with it, we would like to see that inside the Easy Admin Bundle backend. Now there's a bunch of ways that we could go about testing this, and the only way that we're going to cover in this video is to do so using PHP spec. But because this is a visual feature, you may wish to use a tool like Selenium and a library such as Codeception or Bhat to actually test that behavior, the behavior of seeing the image come on the screen, is happening as expected. Because we're only focusing on the PHP spec side of things, we're not going to be able to test every single part of this process. Specifically, we're not going to be able to test the template. If we look under app, resources, views, and then under our form, we've got our image_upload HTML twig template, and our PHP spec test is not going to be able to touch on this. Instead, we're going to focus on testing our uploaded file type. And to begin with, we'll test the existing implementation, which is all the stuff that you see on the screen currently, and then we'll copy in parts of the implementation from our untested approach, which predominantly will be this piece around build view, where we're wanting to add in a file URI, depending on whether we're in a create or update screen, depends on whether we want to have access to a path on that file URI or not. So as it stands currently, we don't yet have a test for our uploaded file type, so let's go ahead and create one. And I'm going to run this straight away to make sure that PHP spec is passing. And that looks good. So I've gone ahead and I've opened up the uploaded file type and the uploaded file type spec, and we're going to get started by adding in a new test. And in this first test, we're going to check what happens when we call build form. So if we mock the builder, then after we've called build form, we would like to assert that the add method was called with the arguments of file, file type class, and the options of multiple being false. So we'll call our function it can build a form. And to get ourselves started, we'll call this build form. And we know that build form expects to be given an instance of form builder interface and an array of options. So we'll mock the form builder interface. And even though we don't own it because it's an interface, we should have no problems here. We don't need to mock the array. We'll just pass in an empty array anyway. And so our assertion is that after build form has been called, our builder mocks add method should have been called with the arguments as they are in our existing function. So we'll say should have been called. Let's make sure that we import this file type class. And let's see where we get with that. Next up, we need to test the build view method. And straight away, we can see that our form view, which we will be using here, is not an interface. And even worse, we're using a public property, which is this array of vars. But even so, let's give it a shot and see where we get. So we'll create a new function which says that it can build a view, and we'll know that we need to call this build view, and build view takes 3 arguments: the view, the form, and the options. So we'll say we'll have a view variable, a form variable, and an empty array of options. Now we have neither the view nor the form, so I'll just try and get PHP spec to mock these. And our assertion here is that after we've called build view, whatever we have set as the full underscore name on our view vars should be concatenated with the string open brackets file close brackets. So on our view, we'll start off by setting on the vars this full underscore name key to have the value, and we'll just have QWERTY as the value. So our assertion will be that after we've called build view, our view vars full name should return QWERTY open brackets file. Okay, let's give this a shot. And unfortunately that doesn't work. We can see here an indirect modification of overloaded property vars has no effect. So that's a bit of a scary looking notice that we're getting there. So let's see what we can do. So we already know that we shouldn't be mocking what we don't own. So let's try refactoring this. We'll start off by creating a view, which will be a new instance of the form view. And is that good enough to get us to where we need to be? Well, let's try our tests. Okay, slightly different problem now. We're getting an exception. Call to a member function should return on a string. So here we are, view vars, full name, should return, and then this string. So the problem is that should return is being called on whatever is set into view vars full name, which is a string. So that's where the error is coming from. We've set a string here, and then we're trying to call a method on that string. So that's never going to work. So we're in a bit of a problem here. We can't mock it, and because we don't own it, as in we don't own the form view, there's not a lot we can do there to change it. I don't want to get into this situation where we're trying to wrap that as well. So I'm going to cheat a little bit here, and I'm going to use a different library to get myself around this problem. So we're going to use the assert library from WebMozart, and if you aren't aware, WebMozart, or Bernard Schussik, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, was the main creator of Symfony's form component. So there's a little bit of irony there that we're having to use a different one of his libraries to get around the problem with another of his libraries, but hey ho. So that all looks like it's gone through okay. So I'm going to get rid of this should return statement down the bottom here, and instead I'm going to do an assert the same. So this is checking that two values are the same, and what we want to do is check that after build view has been called, the outcome of view bar's full name is equal to QWERTY, open brackets, file, close brackets. Let's try that. And that looks good. Now, just to be certain that we've not just cheated completely here, let's try adding in another assert. And we'll say assert true on false. So we should expect this to fail, and it does. So that's quite nice. We know that our assertion is actually working as we intend. So all we have left to test now is the configure options method. And again, we can see that that is not an interface, but we're going to try our luck all the same. So we'll say it can correctly configure options. And again, we'll say this configure options, which in this case is going to take a resolver. So we'll start off by trying to mock that. And a little bit of truth from me here, even though we shouldn't mock what we don't own, typically I start off by trying to and only really adapt if I can't. Now this may be going against like best practices and whatnot, but honestly it works in my projects, and as I say, I adapt when it doesn't. So for me it's good enough. Your opinion may differ, and that's okay too. And all we want to do here is check that this set defaults method was called on our resolver. So we'll say should have been called, and we will need to make sure that we've got the Symfony uploaded file as a use statement inside our spec. And let's give this a shot too, and that's looking good. So this brings us to a point where we have a working test spec for our existing implementation, and now with that test spec in place, we can confidently make changes, knowing that if all our tests are passing at the end, we didn't break anything. And we're going to get on to changing this uploaded file type in the very next video.